Target is pulling the plug on all of its Canadian operations. I'm here to talk to you a little bit today about why they may have come to this decision. Now let me hit you with some facts. Target came to Canada approximately 2 years ago when they purchased many of Zeller's stores to make their entry. Target coming to Canada was a big deal. Canadians were drooling over the deals it would bring and the unique experience it provides to its customers. People were literally lining up outside of the stores when they first opened to experience this awesome new store. They got inside, the stores opened, and Canadians were relatively unimpressed. Meh. Now, fast forward to the present, 2 years later. 17,600 employees, 133 stores. Target spent $7 billion in this international venture. This was their first foray outside of the United States. Target reported $1 billion in losses in their first year, and it kept growing. By the fourth quarter last year, they reported $5.4 billion in losses after the exit costs and operating losses. What was the thought process here? What happened? Now, putting on my MBA hat, the reactions were fairly consistent across the board. From everyday Canadians, from Target employees. But seriously, why leave? You've invested all this money. What made this the right decision? Target invested $7 billion in the Canadian rollout. Should this investment simply be treated as a sunk cost? Should they just cut their losses and leave? This brings up the question, was this a strategy failure at the outset, or was this an execution failure? Now, I'm operating on very little information here because I am not a Target employee. But, to me, if it were an execution failure, this would be much easier to fix for Target. So that leads me to believe that they thought that it was a strategy failure from the beginning. Perhaps they reevaluated the prospects of the Canadian market as a whole, decided that it wasn't worth it, and decided that pulling out was the best idea. If it was an execution failure, they would tailor down the number of companies from 133 to, say, half. Restructure, regroup, change their tactic, and come back fighting. Once they've regained some traction, they can open up those stores that they closed in the first place. Now, that's easier said than done, but they've invested $7 billion in this rollout. They may have bailed because they think that the Canadian economy is not going to do as well as they had originally planned. This is an interesting idea, and a little bit of a scary one as well. Target isn't the only one leaving Canada. Jacob, SmartSet, Mex, all of these companies are jumping ship. Could this be a sign of things to come? All in all, this makes me believe that Target thinks that it was a strategy failure to enter Canada. I think that if it was an execution failure, Target could have turned it around eventually. Something has changed, and I believe that Target thinks that the Canadian economic climate is no longer promising. All in all, this makes me believe that Target thinks that it was a strategy failure to enter Canada in the first place. I think that if it was an execution failure, Target could have turned it around eventually and brought their sales back up. I believe that Target thinks that something has changed and the Canadian economic climate is no longer promising. Now, putting on my everyday regular person hat. A lot of people have questions and concerns, but I don't think we should be that worried. But what about the Canadian unemployment rate? It'll shoot up. According to Stats Canada, there were approximately 18 million jobs in Canada as of December. The unemployment rate at the same time was about 6.6%. This equates to 1.2 million unemployed. If we add 17,000 people to this number, the unemployment rate barely changes. Calm down, people. But what about the job market? The demand for Target's products doesn't simply go away. It's a shift in the markets for sure, but people will just go to competitors' stores to fill this need. Walmart, grocery stores, Best Buy, etc. These competitors will take this business, which will likely result in the need for more employees at those stores. But people can't all find jobs immediately. The market's being flooded with 17,000 people. Yes, across Canada. For the most part, retail jobs are fairly transferable. No issues there. Some economists believe that it won't be difficult at all to find a job, because Target's revenue is now being redistributed to other competitors, and they will therefore need to hire. Part of Target's tactic was to run with a fairly low number of employees. They had fairly lean operations, so it's not like there was an excess number of employees for the amount of revenue that was floating around the market. Plus, Target is giving employees a 16-week severance package. That's pretty generous to me, considering that you usually need to be working at a company for a fairly significant amount of time before they give you a package upon termination. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Target announcement. I hope you learned something, and I hope that gave you an interesting perspective on the news.